Whether reason will prevail depends only partly upon us. We must hope and strive for the best. We must prepare for the worst.
Well, that's the big question. Everyone is waiting to see what the implications are. President Trump has reintroduced a 15% tariff using a different legal code, but that only allows them to keep that in place for about 150 days. Then he needs congressional approval, so people have to see whether it's going to be more permanent. There's also the question of people who have negotiated treaties or understandings, some with tariff rates below 15%, some with rates above. There are many more others who have not negotiated or concluded agreements, and they're wondering whether they should wait or they should agree to. But I think what we do know, of course, is that President Trump will introduce or keep in place some tariffs. It may be a mixture of various legal or institutional approaches to maintain them. There'll be a great deal of uncertainty in timing. So I think businesses will face a period of uncertainty. Governments will have to decide whether it's worth it to honor or to proceed or to wait to see what's going to happen. So I think the big issue is uncertainty. But I think the issue of whether Trump will try to maintain some level of tariffs is pretty clear. He will try. How successful he will be still remains to be seen. Well, if you go back far enough, China is not a problem. Matter of fact, people were trying to encourage China to join WTO, to enter the global economy, to reform, to go faster. The assumption was that a more rapidly growing China would be beneficial to everyone. In some ways, that was true. China entered a period of double-digit growth. That must have elevated growth of other developing countries by 1 or 2 percentage points. So they took off very soon after China took off because China demanded a lot of imports, particularly raw materials, that came from developing economies. So they benefited a lot. But China's trade and investment flows also benefited the West, including the United States. And that was not so obvious that people did not foresee that, but that was very, very significant. Then China's begun what I call a gradual slowdown over the last 7 to 8 years. It's now growing at somewhere closer to 5%. So I think that the issue of China's growth being so rapid was unexpected. Whether it will persist and whether the West will continue to benefit is unclear. And I think now that China was so successful and became a dominant exporting country, he entered a period, particularly under President Biden, of great power competition. Then when Trump came into place, the issue was China's tremendous trade surpluses with the United States. So from a Trump perspective, in his first term, the problem was that America's trade deficits were getting very, very large, and a major source from a U.S. viewpoint was China. And the rounds of tariffs since then, the restrictions since then, have actually cut China's exports to the United States by a significant amount. It's surprising. The U.S. now imports more from Taiwan than it imports from China. So that tiny little island actually sells more goods to the United States than the big country of China. The trade deficit that America has with China has been cut in half. But nevertheless, China's share of global exports has continued to increase, reaching record highs. And the answer is that China is exporting to the United States through other countries, through Southeast Asia and through Europe. Now, if you take Europe as an example, Europe has importing a lot more from China, and the headlines worry about electric vehicles or batteries, but actually it's largely raw materials and spare parts. And those raw materials and spare parts are then used by Europe, and Europe's trade surpluses with America have soared. So now what you see is that from a U.S. perspective, the trade imbalance is not so much driven by China, but driven now by Mexico, by Southeast Asia, by Europe. So tariffs and the trade tensions are in some ways less of an issue from an American perspective than technology and security, military issues, investment flows, and AI. These have become more dominant as concerns rather than trade per se.